Pleasant greetings to all of you. Let me address this lecturette in English for a wider reach among our English-speaking viewers everywhere. Having said that, ironically, I would like to start off by referring you back to a Tagalog word I made up for commitment. The word is kasasigatan. I do this because the elements of commitment or kasasigatan are easily spelled out in this one word, namely, kamalayan sa sarili, that is, having conscious effort in oneself, sigasig, that is, passion, the bigger context of which is, of course, compassion, and katapatan, or fidelity. Of course, it is obvious that these elements are universally present every time we talk about commitment, be this to your profession, your organization, to persons, or any endeavor. But today, let us talk a little about commitment in marriage and relationships. No, this is not about the broad topic of marriage like the ones given during pre-Cana seminars. Oddly enough, this is particularly about bridges. Yes, you heard me right. Bridges. Why? Because we know that to pass through the bridge of any form of commitment, a mature Christian should be ready to burn some bridges whose very existence only allure us to self-destruction. And what are these bridges worth burning down? Mahatma Gandhi mentioned some of this, like the bridges of politics without principles, of pleasure without conscience, the bridge of wealth without work, of knowledge without character, or the bridge of business without morality, the bridge of science without humanity, and the bridge of worship without sacrifice. These bridges, since the beginning of time, have destroyed individuals, families, nations, and the world. If we do not burn these bridges, we shall all be tempted to cross through them in good times and in bad. But when it comes to marital commitment, Jesus hints at the most important bridge to burn, the bridge of love without commitment. So in this lecturette, we shall be discussing in our basic course on relationships some important bridges to keep as well as bridges to burn. So we start with bridges we ought to keep and preserve. First is the bridge of prayer to God. You have heard, of course, the Russian saying we mentioned in the clip. Before going to war, pray once. Before going to sea, pray twice. And before going to get married, pray 3 times. Let me add to that this fact. And to stay married, stay in prayer the rest of your shared lives. A wise advice, don't you think? Why? Because prayer is basic in all relationships. Therefore, the first bridge we need to keep is our direct personal connection with God through prayer. Remember that all important relationships, like marital relationship, only find their meaning and life in this primary relationship with God. A couple that prays together stays together. The second bridge to preserve and keep is the bridge of authority of God in marriage. This simply means that neither the man nor the woman is the authority in the marital relationship. It is God who is head of the home. If we keep this all-important bridge flowing and active, God becomes our home maker. Your children and your children's children will also be godly and God-centered. Is God the head of your home? does God rule your relationships? Making God as the chief homemaker of your marriage and family life, you would fully understand what Jesus meant when he said, "Therefore, what God has joined together, no human being must separate." The very home God had lovingly united and made, let no human weakness divide, separate, and destroy. But now let us mention just one bridge, for lack of space and time, that we ought to burn down, and then offer some practical steps on how to burn or get rid of this bridge. And this concerns the bridge of abusive relationships. For brevity's sake, I won't go into details of what makes a relationship abusive. If you are in one, certainly you would recognize it. It's commonsensical, sort of. But I want to offer some steps that you can take to free yourself from victimhood, to free yourself from this abusive relationship. The first step is to get professional counseling support with or without your partner. I say professional, but I encourage you to first look deeply into the methodology used by these professionals. Make a little background check, especially if the counseling firm the professionals represent have brochures or websites. Let me state a strong advice here. Stay away from counselors who employ New Age techniques or methodologies or occult stuff. Yes, even if these counselors are identified as Catholic and they have Catholic spiritual directors or executives, better still, ask your parish priests for referrals. The second step is to start setting limits by firmly letting the abuser know what kind of behavior you will not accept from him or from her. You have to be emotionally and psychologically matured to be able to do this, because then you are able to identify those behaviors that are abusive and point them out verbally to the abuser. And of course, this leads to the third step. Call the abuser's attention immediately every time he or she is being abusive towards you. The abuser can be your spouse, your parent, your sibling, a friend, or a stranger. The fourth step follows through the previous one. As you call the abuser's attention, stay in the present, calling the abuser's attention only to what he or she has just done and asking him or her to stop immediately. Remember, this is a command. This is not a request. Hence, you need emotional maturity. In marital context, this should lead to emphatic listening to one another, or the dialogue dynamics, which leads us to the fifth step. Ask for changes that you want in the relationship. And here is why psychological and emotional stability is demanded of you. Why? Because you need to have the determination and the means to live the relationship and the situation if the abuser is not to change. Now be aware that you can leave any abusive situation even when you are married in church. I repeat that. You can leave any abusive relationship even when you are married in the church. Please consult your pastor in person in the soonest possible time should you reach this kind of crossroad in your life. You are a free person, remember, a free person, and you should have control over your own life. Now, God asks you, my dear friend, are your bridges worth keeping? if you are preparing for marital commitment, please make sure that you first have a strong, loving relationship with God. That alone is a sign of spiritual, emotional, and psychological maturity. And also, please remember, it is better to call off a marriage by mistake than to enter into it by mistake. Thus, before crossing the bridge of marital commitment, discern with Christ which bridges are meant to be kept and which ones need to be burnt. Married or not, young or old, let me leave you with this Christian challenge. During or after burning all the bad, wicked bridges we have had, we need to build a bridge of genuine love. May God bless all our godly bridges. Amen.